Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to Film Independent Presents, Film Independent's year-round screening program, now of course virtual and online. So happy that you could join us today for this conversation between Dee Rees and Radha Blank about the 40-year-old version, which I'm assuming you've all already watched when we did the screening the other day. Before we get started, I just want to give out a couple thank yous. First of all, thank you to our incredible lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, without whom we would not be here today able to do Film Independent Presents. So thank you to everyone at the HFPA. Thank you to our screening partner, Vision Media. You give us the platform where we can do everything. And thank you to our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. One of the nice things about COVID is it does offer these opportunities of bringing people together on Zoom in different time zones. People are available in different ways where it would be very hard to get people in the theater at the same time. And to have this conversation between Dee and Radha is really a treat for us. And I just want to say, today is about Radha and her film, but I just want to give a special shout out to Dee Rees as a filmmaker that we at Film Independent have known and loved. I remember when we produced the Los Angeles Film Festival, we screened her short film Pariah back in 2007. And it was like, who is this filmmaker? What is this movie? This is so good. We got to know her in the subsequent years when she went on to produce the feature version of Pariah, which of course won the John Cassavetes Award at the Spirit Awards. Then she went on to do Bessie. She did Mudbound in 2017, which won the Robert Altman Award at the Spirit Awards in 2018. Then she has a new film out this year, The Last Thing He Wanted, on Netflix, which came out in 2020. She's just a formidable talent, such a great, unique, original voice. It's an honor to have her here leading the conversation. So with that, Dee, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Josh. Radha, I mean, goddamn, you did this film. Like you did the thing. And I mean, I'm gonna get into all the many things I love about your film, but I mean, the thing that jumps out is like this film has a vintage. You know, like from the opening frame, you feel that from the music choice, like we move through in this film from Tribe Called Quest to like Stakes is High, instrumental mixed in there. And then we end with like Love and Peace, Quincy Jones. Your photography is crispy, the black and white. And just like the way you block scenes, the way you use the camera, the tone is very layered. And so you can tell that this kind of tone, this kind of complication takes time to build. Like it has hints of romance, it's funny, it's melancholic, it's got everything. So how did you maybe talk about how you built this tone and like how you like layered this film in such a complicated way?
Yeah, first of all, okay, come on. All right, this is Dee Rees. So thank you, Film Independent, and thank you for hosting this. This is an amazing moment. Yeah, you know what? I am a student of cinema and I was raised by a cinephile. And so, you know, filmmakers like John Cassavetes, Killing of a Chinese Bookie and, you know, Opening Night, like these are films that were just a part of our watching as young people, as kids, you know. As far as black and white, you know, it's not foreign to me because I grew up on Some Like It Hot and The Apartment and Manhattan and She's Gotta Have It and Lost Weekend, Night of the Hunter, you name it. Like it was just part of our viewing because my mom was really into film. And so I think it was always in the back of my head to make a film in black and white. After a number of years, you know, I realized like, if I'm gonna make a mark as a filmmaker, I have to be really bold and kind of step out in a bold way. And, you know, it wasn't bold for my forefathers and foremothers using 35 millimeter black and white film. It was the format that they had 30, 40 years ago. But for some reason, it feels like something groundbreaking to do now. And trust me, everybody warned me. They were like, why would you do that? You can just do digital and make it look like black and white film, or you can shoot in color and make it and then turn it to black and white. And I just felt like, no, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make a black and white film, a truly black and white film. And yeah, so it's like, I feel like with the 40-year-old version, I am telling a story that probably should have been told 30 years ago. So black and white lends itself to that. You know, I'm obsessed with the photography of Roy DeCarava, who as a Black man is taking photographs of Black people in black and white. And yet there are these beautiful shades of gray. There's these silver tones where everyone from my complexion to yours, they just look sumptuous. And so there was that, wanting to do that. And then also, like, I just wanted to give, I guess, hip hop the Godard treatment, like just do something that felt cool and smooth and sophisticated and vulnerable. And so in doing that, it felt like one of the highest compliments I've gotten about the film is that people think it takes place in the 90s, and it doesn't. It takes place sometime around now. But I love that because, you know, my intention was to kind of put New York in a time capsule. You know, I'm a native New Yorker. I'm here now. And, you know, of course, COVID has changed things, but things have just changed, you know, over the years. Like, you know, the people who create the culture here, which tend to be immigrant communities, poor working class people, and artists like who my parents were in the 70s, they just can't afford to live here anymore. So New York is changing right before my eyes. And so the film kind of became both a love letter and a Dear John letter. And I have to give a shout out to my DP, Eric Bronco, who is a New York native from the Bronx, who is known for Chinonye Chukwu's film, Clemency, a brilliant, brilliant film. But with this film, even though he's from New York, he had not shot on black and white 35 millimeter film, not motion film, you know, like he done photography. And so we both were like kind of obsessed with making a black and white film. When I spoke to him and you know, he found out it was a black and white film, he was determined to get the job. He's been living in LA for the last 10 years with his beautiful wife and gorgeous daughter. But when he came to New York to meet with me, he literally had a suitcase of clothes and a suitcase of black and white photo, coffee table books. Like, and so he lugged this thing across the country. I mean, it wasn't enough for him to send me a link or something. Like, I have a digital lookbook. He had to bring the pictures because he knew, looking at it on this glossy page or on this matte or monochromatic, that he was speaking my language. And so that's when I knew we would do this together, because he was just as invested in doing our version of New York in black and white.
No, it's gorgeous, and like all those references are there. You see it, it's there, and it's like there's a formalism to the style, you know, but it's not stiff. It breathes, you know. For example, I'm thinking of the moment in the hallway where, you know, Radha kind of like lies to herself when she's talking to her actress and saying, "Oh, well, here's why, you know, we had to have this director, but you know, we like zoom in on you," and she's like, "Are you happy with it?" And you say, you know, you like deflect, but going to your character, like, and the way you build characters, like your work as a playwright is evident because these characters are complicated, and you build them in such a way that we must see them. It's like the depth is there, and like for Radha, you know, she comes as this kind of frustrated genius, you know, whose authenticity is constantly being questioned, and you know, they're like small details, like, you know,
I wonder where I drew from.
I wonder who that was from. But she's always nursing something. She always has this drink in her hand. So like this nursing, this kind of suckling theme kind of starts to emerge. So I wonder if you could talk about how you built Radha's character and like how you also then separated it from you as Radha, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so much of the character is me, right? We share the same first and last name. All of the artwork of my mother is my mother. My brother is my brother. My favorite scene changes every time, but right now my favorite scene is when I finally go to my mother's apartment. My father's jazz music is playing in the background. My mom's artwork is on the wall. I get a little choked up, and then my brother is there. And so we're finally in a room together, these 4 Black artists, right? Yeah, like I a lot of it was cathartic. A lot of it did come from me. And there was a point when the story was a web series. And so when it was a web series, you know, I was kind of pulling from my life. When it was time to transform it into the film, there was a big difference between the character in the web series and the character in the film. I had lost my mother. And I felt like if I'm doing a send up of my life, I have to put that in there. But I found that once I put that in there and that became part of the dramatic conflict, I had to find a way to separate myself from the character. So I created things for the character, like the 30 under 30 award. I've not ever had that, but I did create that device to create a reminder, or trigger for the character around her age, and make this thing of like, I need a breakout, I need it urgent. So we kind of had that up against this award. And also, there's no proof that I choked a white theater producer. I will deny that to this day.
No charges were filed, but
no charges were filed, no photographs were taken. But that I realized, like, what would I really want to do?
Yeah.
And so I gave it to the character. It's not something I would do, but I gave it to the character, and I was like, oh, this is going to create an interesting turn in the plot. Like, I'm very much a fan of characters plotting their way. There's a book called The Art of Dramatic Writing by Lejos Igri, where the idea is to write from character. Because if you write from character, you take the time to really develop a character down to their toenail. You know what they'll do in a given situation. You create one character and another character, and then you create a fire, and each of them are going to have a different reaction to what's happening with this burning house. And so, creating devices and moments like that choke that would then force the character into a certain place. At that point, we're almost at the end of the first act. Her career in the theater is done. Yeah. So it makes space for the Rodimus Prime character to arise, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No. And see, just off that one moment, like, we could spin in three different directions, because like the choking of the character, one, I love that wasn't fantasy. I love it because it'd be easy to be like, oh, cut back to her real life. I love that it wasn't fantasy. I love that she did that.
People have seen that. People have read that. And I'll be honest with you, I was in a writing group with other Black women. And we're walking around with our stories, but also walking around with the awareness of what it is to do something as a Black character in a scene. And I remember one of them saying, you sure you want to do that? Can we do a fantasy take where we see the choke and then we cut back in real time and it was just a fantasy? And I said, no.
Yeah, that'd have been too easy. We've seen that. Also as a character point, because it shows this character doing these like self-destructive in a way things, or self-limiting things. And the second thing I thought about, so since you brought up your mother, I mean, honestly, like the other thing that you really do with this is that it's like the grief stays outside the frame for as long as possible. So in the first 2 minutes, right, we know your character has pent up sexual energy. Is like, she's
I wonder where I got that.
And, she's getting off to the neighbors.
Hey.
She's, we get that she's like 30 under 30. We get that she's tasted success before and is trying to get back to that. Like, you show the trophy, no words are said around that. Like, we get that she's trying to get back to that moment. And then the third thing, like, your brother's just a voice, so your brother's just this voice for the whole film. We don't see your brother to the last 30 minutes. So I want you to speak to the choice of keeping the grief outside the frame, but so present, in the characters.
I appreciate you clocking that, Dee, because I remember going through, I believe it was Sundance Labs or something, and or showing someone a cut of the film, and they were like, I don't know that it's clear that this woman is grieving. And
so clear, it's over everything. Sorry, go ahead.
No. But we're speaking about something here, and I think that sometimes when it comes to Black characters, there is this there is this, we kind of wash over the contemplative Black character, or the character who's experiencing grief very quietly. I think we're used to being emotive on camera, and this hurts. And when I think about what it is to lose my mother, another difference between me and the character, it's been 7 years for me and it was a year for her, is you get to this place where it is a constant companion, but it's not one you talk about. You just are walking around with this thing. And so I wanted it to be where this person was walking around with this thing, but not acknowledging it because it was too much. And so that's what the brother represented. And this is very real life, because 6 months after my mother passed away, I moved to LA to work in TV. And my brother would be like, yo, I'm your brother. You call me your best friend. You can't call me back. And it really was about me just thinking like, I cannot deal with this thing. So that's what it is. A person who is not willing to face her reality until it smacks her back, whether it's, you know, the guy on the bus or, I mean, the bus driver played by Styles P, or when Oswin Benjamin's character Dee goes, nah, my mother's dead. You know, like she was going in one direction and this thing she's been avoiding pops back into her face, you know? So thank you for seeing that, because I do feel like when it comes to Black characters, Dee, I don't know if you're dealing with this, but I feel like we're still telling the world what is possible for us around expression. I saw a movie a few years ago called Ghost Story, where Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck are in a love affair. Casey Affleck gets into a car crash and dies. She is suffering from the loss, and he is haunting her as a ghost. And part of her dealing with her grief finds her sitting down in front of her stove in the kitchen on the floor with a pie. And Rooney Mara eats the entire pie on screen. There's no cutting away. There's no speeding up of the camera. She does it in real time. I don't know how long it takes, but it is at least 3 minutes. And in that moment, I'm like, we don't see Black characters do that.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you know, you have a killer of sheep, think Charles. Every once in a while, you'll have a Chameleon Street, you know, but for the most part, there's this expectation around Black expression, and it doesn't often include mundanity or silence. And so I really wanted to access those things. And here's a woman who is grieving, but not saying it, but you see it and you feel it, because just because of a silence or her letting out a breath or staring at a picture, you know? So I was being very deliberate about that. And I, you know, I'm coming from the theater world where, you know, plot is always in the mouths of the characters. Like you're in that box and you're watching the characters to tell you what is happening. I feel like as a filmmaker now, I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm actually wanting to get quieter and quieter with every film and use other devices to express tone and emotion, not the typical color, loud, expressive thing that we are kind of boxed into, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a brilliant choice. And I understand what you're saying is like Black characters, Black artists is usually like, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Make them say it. There's a push toward literalism for them to like be like literal and to say the thing. And also then in the edit to like push it through, speed it up, speed it up, speed it up, move it along, you know?
Girl,
versus
let
just
me tell
like,
you something.
let's just be on this bus. Yeah.
I said, girl, I'm sorry. I hope
no,
that's
it's
okay.
fine. Yes, this is good. This is what
I'm like the 80-year-old grandma. Do I call you a girl? Do I call you?
Yes,
Is this
yes.
program? I apologize.
Yeah.
But that was another thing. The runtime. You know, it's like the first cut. I'm not gonna lie. The first assembly, I worked with Rob Wilson, who's an amazing editor. He did that. He created that beautiful sequence when Radha and Dee are going from Midtown to the Bronx, paired with this beautiful Beat Miners song. But you know, the first assembly was 2 hours and 38 minutes long, which I know that I didn't want the movie to be that long, but I knew the movie wasn't 90 minutes, Dee. Not this story, not something that is supposed to be chock full of New Yorkers. And, you know, my character is more like the mirror or the satellite moving through, and all of these things are kind of happening around her. That was not going to be a 90-minute film. But I felt the pressure to make it 90 minutes, not from my producers per se, but people who I think when it comes to us, it is like, just give me my Happy Meal. Like, give me my quick, you know, where's my color? Where's my dancing? Where's my head? You know,
I don't want to like work for it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And to me, I was like, no, I'm going to slow it down so people can breathe, so that maybe we linger in this scene for 20 seconds longer than you would expect, because we breathe in between talking. We breathe before we walk somewhere. When I wake up in the morning, I don't go, oh shit, I'm awake. You know, like I sit there for a good long time. I may look around the room, get me some water, scratch my ass. There's so much silence before I actually speak. And so I wanted to do that. But like, I say this joke, I'm like, I not only appropriated Judd Apatow's title, I appropriated his running time, because I think if it's well earned, then what's 2 hours? What's 2 hours? Like, what is 2 hours? There was nothing else to cut from this film. There was
You
nothing
don't
else to
feel
cut.
it. It feels, I mean, because the way you structured it. So because you structured it that way, in that not letting us know, it makes the payoff with the Mama May I that much more
Mm.
poignant. Like I'm tearing up in that scene because I'm like,
Oh,
when you meet Dee, Dee's had the same kind of grief, and he kind of opens you up like you're not the only one. And
right.
then nothing is said, and then after you make love, then that moment where then he just starts this expression, and then that's his way of like then letting Radha express, and like that moment is beautiful, and like the composition
you.
of the mirror, like it all pays off, and then also the movie's unexpected because you think like, okay, this is going to be a movie about a struggling playwright, and that in itself would have been enough, but then when it's like Rodimus Prime, it's like, oh shit, so maybe like thematically there's a choice going on, right? This kind of impossible choice that I think a lot of Black artists face. So it's like the impossible choice between Forrest Petrie and Jay Whitman. Like, and like, so it's the choice of, do you get to work at a certain scale and a certain like sceneness, or do you get to get the scale and sceneness, but compromise everything you do? So maybe talk about that for your character, and then maybe as an artist, like,
I just find like Black theater, this searing expose came out today in the Los Angeles Times, where 40 Black playwrights and theater makers are talking the truth. We're in this moment where the killing of George Floyd and the killing of Breonna Taylor, it's hitting us in a way the other killings have not, simply because we have to be home because of COVID. So the advent of that is this racial reckoning, right? Where everybody's kind of going in and like telling the truth, because I think that people just haven't been aware of like what it is Black folks are going through in this country. So naturally, Black folks confronting gatekeepers in an institution are dealing with something too. I find that Black theater makers are vacillating between extremes. It is the Black theater that's been there for 30, 40 years that has no resources. That scene was based on a real story with a Black theater who wanted to do a world premiere of my play, but didn't have the resources to really give it a world premiere. So I remember saying to them, well, can we make it a workshop production? Because to call it a world premiere, it should be on a certain, they didn't have the resources. They just didn't. And then you go to the white theater that has just had a $60 million building fund, rebuild. And yet it still feels like a desert there, because you're one of a handful of playwrights. You're the Black representation. So don't do anything controversial, because now everybody's looking at you. I'm thinking about Brandon Jacob Jenkins and his play Neighbors, how much scrutiny he got because there weren't any other Black plays being produced at that particular theater. So it's like, it really is a world of extremes. And I wanted to bookend, I wanted her to be between those two worlds where as an artist, she was not going to get what she needed from either of those institutions. And that kind of adversity, just like in my own life, you have to go in another direction. And so that's where I think Rodimus Prime came from. Something that was DIY, self-produced, self-contained. She can't get fired. She can't be cut out of the season. But yeah, that's what that is about, is vacillating between those two extremes,
Yeah. And Rodimus Prime, the thing about, so apartment like 1A, right? It becomes this metaphorical space where we can go for expression, and it's a space that's not about the performative. And it feels like that's the break. In 1A, you're performing for yourself. You're saying, you're just expressing.
This isn't 8 Mile. This isn't 8 Mile. She's not going after hip hop stardom. It's more like 2 Mile. Like she ain't going that far. And for me, I think, maybe the Netflix promo stuff leads you in a certain direction that you think is about hip hop stardom. And it's okay. I think we're doing that to kind of tantalize and pull people into the story. But really, for me, hip hop is a meditation for this character. It shows up in many ways. The trap music outside the window, the cipher in Arlene's grocery, the battle rap between the women in the Bronx, like it is transforming into whatever she needs in the moment. So when she walks off at the end with Dee, is she going to make a mixtape? Is she going to write a play? I don't know. I think the whole point of the journey was to get her to that stage where she is now being served a certain level of success on a platter. And then she tastes it and she's like, I don't like this shit. That's what I think the whole point of the journey. I've seen people do reviews where they're like, but I want to know what happened. And I'm like, That's not what the movie is about. It's not about the destination, not to be corny, but really is about this protagonist getting the fucking nerve to say, I miss my mom, that shit hurts. And I'm not participating in this bullshit anymore. Goodbye. That really is the journey. You know what I mean?
We're going to do. Yeah. And there's like that key turning point where when she goes to Queen of the Ring with Dee and she's like resistant. It's like, I'm not going to a party. But I thought that was really interesting because it's about, as an artist, like it put across two things. It was like reconnecting with your own, having your own relationship with your work, you know, that's separate apart from any other relationship, like with your work. And then reconnecting like with the audience and having to be accountable to the audience and responsible to the audience. And so I thought that was gorgeous because you see her turning back on in that moment, like, oh, this, you know.
Yeah,
and like,
I think audience is important. Yeah. There's a reason why I show Radha Prime like in that cipher, like she's eating with the rest of the dudes, but when she gets on stage, Icarus, the sun, wah, wah, you know, like the stage presentation of art does not make a person an artist. It doesn't. It doesn't. We laud that. We celebrate that. We revere the presentation of art, but there are people who are creating art right now and no one sees them. You know, there are people who are who are rhyming to the mirror. There are people who are singing in a shower or, you know, in a hospital bed. Like art is this thing that we've put limitations on it. We consider someone an artist if they're successful and they're on stage and performing. So it was important for me, even though people say that scene is completely like cringeworthy and like it makes people really like uncomfortable. I think I am being like, I'm trying to say something about, you know, us putting performance and this performance in front of an audience. That's what's heralded, not this quiet expression of art.
Exactly. And then, so speaking, I think a lot of the reasons why some artists aren't appreciated is because they're ahead of their time. And you, Radha, are obviously ahead of your time, which brings me, seriously, which brings me to Afrofuturism, you know what I mean? And so, especially when you think about your father's work, when you think about your mother's work, when you show her art, I was like, oh my God,
yeah.
I want this on my wall. I want this in the museum. Like, oh my God, you know? So I wonder if you could talk about like your relationship. Like, would you consider this an Afrofuturist text? And like, if not, and
that's so interesting. God, I'm enjoying this conversation, Dee. I mean, like you really have me thinking about things. You know, when I think of Afrofuturism and my parents, I think about my dad because he played with Sun Ra in the orchestra. And I'm going to mine that story for the next whatever. But you know what's interesting is like several people have reached out to me who didn't know about the film. Several people have reached out to me saying, I think I own a piece of your mother's artwork.
Wow.
And the two people in particular, two Black women who were like, is Carol Blank your mother? I think I own. And then I was like, can you send me pictures just to be sure? And it was her work. And this is like within the last 2 weeks. And so it says to me that there is a space for the artist in a time that the artist is not even. And what we have to do as the person creating the work or the person holding on to the work is we have to preserve it for its time. Like, I don't know how I feel about selling my mother's work just yet. But I definitely want more people to see it. And I wonder when she was painting, was she thinking, just a couple of things I have to say. When Radha is coming out of the train station, going to Brownsville, going back to this world, it's kind of new, but it's kind of old. She passes a bodega that has the Coptic art on it, the Egyptian Coptic art.
Yep.
I'd never seen that before. We were on a location scout and they were like, we have some bodegas to show you. And we're coming down the block and I am across the street and I started screaming like somebody shot me.
Oh my God.
And people are looking at me. I was like, oh my God, guys. And they're like, what? They don't know we didn't shoot that scene yet.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing it and I'm fucking losing my shit. I'm like, we're on the corner of Rockaway and whatever the cross street is. There is a Coptic art that I have not, the only time I've seen Coptic art is my mother's rendition of it and in books and maybe on a YouTube thing. The fact that I saw that there feels like someone from the past walking into the future. So I feel like, to answer your question, even though I hadn't really contemplated it, clearly my parents as artists have a life beyond their passing and beyond their era as an artist, because both my parents had to do other things to support their family, you know? And I'm thinking about when I was 8 years old, my play was always encouraged, performance was always encouraged. I was always encouraged to write and tell stories. And my mother was like, well, sit down and write a story. You know, it's a Sunday, it's rainy, write a little story, you know, do challenge yourself and maybe make it take place in a place you wouldn't think. So I wrote this story about this Black family, a mom, a dad, a brother and a sister who lived in the world. And they were just sick and tired of all the isms, the racism, ageism, sexism, jingoism. And so the father, being a scientist, builds a spaceship and they travel, they leave the earth and they find this unpopulated planet where they decide to settle in. This is perfect. It's quiet, it's peaceful, blah, blah, blah. They dismantle the ship and they start to live their lives. Only as time passes, they are bored out of their fucking minds and they cannot take it. And they realize that in order to function, they're going to have to go back to the very dysfunctional planet Earth. So they put the ship back together and they fly back to, and they
crazy.
Just like, they rather, this is at 8 years old.
I want to see this.
Maybe. That's interesting. The thing I remember about reading that story to my mom, who again was my first audience, is she had like tears in her eyes. And I'm like looking at it like, it's not that great of a story. Oh, God. What is she? It's the first thing she said was like, oh my God.
That's dope.
You see Black people in the future? Like, she was so turned on by that. And then the second thing she said is, you're going to be a great writer one day. And I've carried that with me. You know, it took me a year to get back. It took me some years to get back to this idea that I could be an artist as a writer. I could support myself. I could buy a house. Thank you, Cookie and Lucius Lyons. You know, like, it took me a while to come back to that. But even my mother back then was talking about creating, you know, a world in the future for Black people where we existed and we were smart and we were functioning and we cared about humanity and we could erect ships, take them down, whatever. Like, so that idea of Afrofuturism, I think it began for me in that moment. Like, oh my God, this is about projecting. And so I feel like I'm in that place right now where, like, people are hitting me up about my father. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name who reviewed us in the New Yorker. I should be shot, but he does a post and he does a positive thing about the film, and then he goes, oh, and by the way, I realized that the Radha Blank in her film, who's her father, is my favorite jazz percussionist who played with Walter Davis and Laji Camara, and you know, and I just was like, oh my goodness, my parents as artists are still alive. Their work is still in the ether. And so with that, I feel like I've done my job. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I have so much more. I got like notes, but I gotta turn it over. I gotta let other people ask questions.
Right.
Before I do that,
this is probably, you know, been doing a lot of talking. I know you've been on this end of, you know, promoting a film and stuff. But this is the kind of conversation I want to have more of in this space, because one, I think it's important to have two Black women filmmakers talking to each other who have two completely different voices, but also, you know, my version of activism is like demystifying the process for future generations, because I think I don't have a problem with where I am as a filmmaker. I do realize it probably happened later because I was so intimidated. You know, like I felt like if you don't have the money, you can't get it done. And clearly that didn't stand in the way, you know, of me crafting this story from the inside out.
That's right. All right. I'm just thinking one last just kind of quote from your film that really hit me before we turn it over. Us Against the World. So it's from Archie. Us Against the World was cute in high school, but I like opportunity. To stay an underdog, you have to lose shit. I just want to know, like, where that line came from. Like, that's just such a specific sentence and such an
I don't know. I just think about the identity of the struggling artist sometimes, and how having lack, like, you know, we associate that with maybe creating character, you know, and so it kind of gets romanticized. And I think that is what's romantic about the underdog, is that they're missing something. That's what makes them an underdog, you know? And he's like, if you want to continue to play that role, because it is a role, then know that myself and other opportunities are just going to keep passing you by, if that's what you want to focus on. To be that, though, you have to not have something. And I'm trying to get some shit. I like my silken robes. I like going to Greece with my thongs. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I love that line. Okay, let me get some questions going. Let me see. Oh, I'm trying to I'm cherry picking. So this is from Jonathan, who says, I enjoyed the film very much and identified with it. Who or what influenced you to make the film, which you've kind of spoken to, and what did you learn from the experiences?
What I learned from the experiences, and this is as a person who did not go to film school, is no amount of film school training can prepare you for being on set. That is going to be your greatest teacher. And that for me, what made me a filmmaker was not just hiring great artisans to collaborate with in creating this film. It was how I responded to the adversity. Because I remember having a really bad night where it felt like my biggest failure. We were so close to the end of the shoot. Things were breaking down. My body was breaking down. My brain wasn't working. Permits were, and I probably could have been kinder to people in that moment. But I really wasn't kind to myself. And I felt like I had failed. And I remember my assistant at the time, Ashton Pina, I remember him rubbing my leg in the back of a car to comfort me as I cried from Brownsville all the way to Harlem. And I was just like, I fucked up. I didn't want to, I felt like disappearing. I hadn't felt that level of embarrassment and shame since I was maybe 16 and something embarrassing happened in high school. And at that point I was like, I just want to disappear. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I went to sleep and I woke up the next day and I went to set. And I was like, well, maybe I am a filmmaker, because that was horrible. I felt like shit. And yet, and still, I showed up the next day. That's when I became a filmmaker. It wasn't about some great teachings or the resources. It really was just about me to withstand the adversity and how I responded to the adversity. So that was the lesson.
That's right. And this next question I really love, because it speaks to another thing that you did. And you're in a small club, Orson Welles, Charlie Chaplin, Spike Lee, Shirley and you, to act, write, and direct. So this question comes from G.
Yes, my therapy bill is very high.
Okay, got you. So so they say, love the film, reminded me of Spike Lee debut, She's Gotta Have It, excited to hear a new voice. My question was, what was your biggest challenge being a triple threat?
Just physically having the stamina, that was very challenging. Spike was 26 when he made the film. I was not, and I wasn't anywhere near it. And so, I made sure I hydrated, but just the physical stamina. And then also at one point I had to say goodbye to the screenwriter. I was like, okay, you've done your job.
Right.
I'm tired of you trying to rewrite these scenes. They're good. They're good enough, Exactly. And so, Clark Johnson was one of my advisors at Sundance. And he's another person who's been in work that he's directing. And he said, just do yourself a favor. When it's time to get in the scene, let the director go for the scene, at least, because otherwise you'll be in the scene and you'll say a line to your actor. And then the minute they start talking, you go,
I was going to wonder.
So I really had to shut off parts of myself so I could be a generous scene partner. Otherwise I would be like, why is she looking at me like that? That's not what I want in the scene. Oh my God, this is terrible. And I did a lot of rehearsal before, and my job, to me, my biggest job, I don't know if you feel the same way, Dee, is just hire the right actors. Right?
That's right. Casting,
hire the right actors and trust they're going to do their shit. That's why they're hired. I mean, I always say, I can't play a tuba. I can't tell you how to play a tuba. If that's your thing, I can be a conductor and I can make sure that what you create and bring to the sound is in concert with these other sounds. But I'm gonna hire the right actor. We're going to rehearse at a time. When we get on set, there might be an adjustment here or two, but I trust that you know what you're fucking doing. You're my co-author and I'm going to let you do your job. So
Right.
then I could be a generous actor in the scene with this other person. But I had to figure out how to cut those parts off and calling them when I needed them and then tell them, please shut up while I, do the other thing.
Yeah, and I mean that's like a 15 degree of difficulty on a scale of 1 to 10, because that was just like, I mean, because you answered what I was going to say, how did you attune those performances and then attune your own performance, but then be in the scene like, oh my God, you didn't go into like director face, like you said. So
you know what I have to say, one, being in the film gave me such a profound respect for actors. I don't call myself an actor. If you see that anywhere, that's somebody else. I prefer to just say writer, director, or I'm a performer who's in her own films, because I don't have the wherewithal. I definitely don't have the training, but there are a couple of actors who I studied. Anjanou Ellis, Nicole Biari are great listeners. Like, I didn't realize until I worked with them doing some workshop and stuff, how big a thing that is in acting, is listening. And that's what I just decided to do. It's like, let the person tell me whatever it is they want to tell me and let it land on me and then respond. Like I'm not an actor, but I am thinking about the journey of the character and what is needed in the scene. And in order for me to go from point A to point B, there has to be some information given to me. And I'm responding to that. I'm not necessarily waiting to perform. I'm just letting something land on me first. That was part of I don't come from training. So I was like, I got to figure something out while I'm in these scenes. And that was just my approach, really.
And do you feel like your work in theater was helpful in that? Because in theater, it terrifies me as a director, because like, you can say the actors, you can rehearse whatever you want, but on stage, they got it. That's it. They can get up and like, they can do whatever they want. So did you have that kind of vulnerability, or like, how was that?
Very much so. I feel like we did a lot of one-ers. We'll be in a scene and the camera's swinging back and forth between actors. We're not cutting away. And I learned some lessons about that. It meant that I might have been a little bit limited in what I had to build the scene, but I also trust my actors. I'm in a scene with Peter Kim, who is a theater vet. And so when we're in the scene where I come to tell him I want to rap for the first time, and we're on the bench and the camera doesn't cut away, it really is theater. We might have done 2 or 3 takes of that, but I just was so moved by how much he trusted me and how generous he was in the scene, so that I could then give him something, but that was definitely my theater past coming out in those scenes. But I'm also a fan of Christopher Guest and mockumentaries. And I wanted it to feel like when the camera showed up, it was almost like a person peeking in on a conversation as it was happening. And so in that way, less cutaways, less coverage. Coverage became a bad word. I didn't want anybody saying that to me.
Okay.
Do we want coverage? I was like, we have coverage in a documentary where a house is on fire and we're trying to capture that. We're going to shoot the other side of no, like, let's just, you know what I mean? And so it was theater, it was, documentaries, mockumentaries. Those are things that were always kind of in my mood board, so to speak, as I was making the film.
Interesting. So Blanca Martinez wants to know, art student and film over here. It's so beautiful here. You talk about Roy DeCarava, Godard, and seeing that Kerry James Marshall poster in the background. What other artists have inspired you? And thank you.
Kerry
was insane.
Kerry James. I call Kerry James the mirror, because the figures are so black and opaque. You can actually see yourself in the blackness. The other artist who inspired me is Carrie Mae Weems. She, I think, is the first time I might have been aware of Black women portraiture in photography. I might have seen her photography when I was like 18 or 19 and been like, And the fact that she's a subject in her own, storytelling, but oftentimes looking into a mirror, or there's a mirror present. And so that's where all the mirrors come from, is from Carrie and from Carrie. Carrie and Carrie, the 2 black mirrors, they both are to me the mirrors, because with Kerry James, it's like he's opened up this vista of Black life. And like, there are so many places where you can see yourself. And with Carrie, to me, it is the first time I'm seeing a Black woman contemplate her reflection and her identity. Because that's what I think the film is saying, is like, you can be 40 and still go, am I happy? Do I like what I'm doing? Am I even enjoying my life? What am I? How am I? You know what I mean? And with the character, to me, here's a woman who loses her mother as she's approaching 40 and still needs her mother. That's where all the other Black women come from the old woman in the street, to the women on the bench, to the old lady on the bus, to the old lady on the train. There are these Black women who are watching her, you know, almost like the ancestors, so to speak, because she still needs guidance. 40 is nothing. You don't know everything about the world. You definitely know everything about yourself. So that's where Carrie and Carrie come in, is this contemplative, reflective Black figure looking at themselves.
That's right. Black. All right. Let me get another one. Da-da-da. All right. Love the film. Wonderfully stylized and a genuinely creative dramedy. What made you decide to, well, you kind of talked about what made you decide to present it in black and white, but I mean, the thing that's interesting is the slow transition of color at the end. Like that was beautiful. So maybe talk about that end shot where it's like slowly grows.
You know, Eric Bronco will tell you, this really was a labor of love. We did 3 camera tests, and at one point, I was a purist, and I was like, everything is going to be black and white. I don't care. I knew I wanted the vignettes to be in color because that was supposed to be like the fantasy of the film. Those little theater vignettes would be in color, but everything else was going to be black and white film. And we would go places and he'd say, Radha, I mean, we're in this cavernous, you know, a loft space for this battle. There's no way to light this, you know, and get a good black and white capture. He would show me on his camera, he would take pictures. And so I was like, okay, fine. For this nighttime interior, we'll shoot it in color. And then that began the conversation of like, well, we have a couple of nighttime exteriors, Radha. Like, I know you want to be 98% black and white, but, and so that was one of the shots. It was in Brownsville that we shot in color. And I just have to tell you, it was kind of a beautiful mistake. Like a couple of other things that happened in the film. The film had been transferred at one of the houses here in New York. And Rob and I were looking at all of the new stuff that came in. And by mistake, that particular footage, we didn't have the transversion. It popped up in color. Wow. Right? And I'm looking at it and I was like, what's that? He's like, nothing, no color, no color. Yeah. And I was like, no, what is it? He's like, this is your last shot. And I was like, holy shit. You know, it was seriously underdeveloped. Yeah. And because of the voices, we kind of get what's going on, but really you don't see the full picture because we didn't have time. We didn't have a license. We didn't have permits, whatever. We just grabbed that shit. Yeah. But when I saw the colored version of it, I said, holy shit, we're going to have it turn to color so we can just get a little bit more of the definition. And trust me, Dee, a part of me was fighting against that because I was like, Radha, no, you are not a sentimental. What are you doing? That shit is so sweet. That shit is so sweet and saccharine. I was like, it's too sweet. It's too saccharine. Like, you don't even have these people holding hands, and now you're going to have them in color. It was like agave. Huh? It was agave. It wasn't sweet. It was just a little bit of agave. A little touch of agave. Right, let's keep the blood sugar low. But like, I was just like, Radha, that's not you. What are you doing? But the filmmaker in me was like, but Radha, you want more definition in the shot. You want more of the aesthetic in the shot. Yeah. There's your answer right there. And so even though a part of me was avoiding sentimentality, avoiding certain close-ups, avoiding cutting to a person's face to see their reaction. Like there's a scene where he goes, yo, what you doing Thursday? Everyone in Sundance was like, put her face in there. It's like, no, don't put her face in there. Now you create even more of a question like, what is she? What's going on? And the answer doesn't get answered until later in the scene. So I'm avoiding all of that shit. But it turned out to be a beautiful mistake because now we have this, and my editor, Rob Wilson, is always looking out for me. He was like, Radha, you sure you want to show your hand? You know, you keep saying you want to make a purely black and white film. This means you haven't. You're letting people know that some of it is in color. And I was like, at that point, I didn't care. Let them see, you know, the 20% of my panty showing, you know, of the color that we use in the film. And then we have a sweet moment because, you know, they're, you know, I'm a romantic in real life. I'm not a romantic writer, but that'll be the romance between them. These are two people who don't ever say, I love you, or I care for you, or you're attractive. Dee says, when she says, yeah, trust me, you know, it gets harder to lose weight. He goes, ain't nothing wrong with you. That's his version of saying you're beautiful.
Exactly.
So, you know, I let a little of that saccharine seep into the end of the film, and I'm okay with it. Yeah.
It was a gorgeous choice, and it was earned. Stuff is only sugary when it's not earned. So that was earned, you know?
Thank you.
I
And
mean,
that's a playwright. I think
yeah.
we're always trying to earn the ending. We're always trying to earn the choices. And so I appreciate hearing that from you, because honestly, it was about technicality first. Like, I can't see shit. When we turn to color, we see more. So
it was perfect, because it's like, you know, you meet the woman at the beginning who feels like, is my life like it? Like, am I done? And that move to color is like, oh, I'm just beginning. Like, I'm just blocking.
Right. And it doesn't answer the question, what is she going to do? It's not about that. It's just about her having that transition. And I also feel like, to me, when it turns to color, it's a reminder that we just saw a film. This was a film. This was a story. This was made up. And now maybe we're into another reality with this character. So yeah.
So there's a quote that I love. It comes from Forrest Petrie, you know, which you nailed, like the tri names, like the altar, the patchouli. But he says, you know, the ancestors are always with us, always watching. I trust them. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to that. And is that something you feel as an artist?
Absolutely. I have to be honest with you. My intention with that scene was to kind of make fun of him. Like, to be like, this
and you do, it's funny,
but and to make fun of his beliefs too. That was my intention. Is like, and that's why she's like,
you talk to my ancestors?
The ancestors said that. Can you ask them to hook me up then? Like, can we try my ancestors this time?
Yeah, my Aunt Carol.
Like, I'm making fun of all of that, and yet I find myself where Forrest is. You know, like, I could not have made this film without these people who are working from whatever dimension, whatever world. I won't even define it. They definitely had their hand on it. The Netflix doesn't know. The movie came out October 9th. They don't know that my mother passed away October 7th. And then my father passed away October 28th.
Wow.
They have no idea. So the ancestors are. And so, like, I'm not going to shout it from the rooftops, but, you know, when I started off, when I was writing the script, I was making fun. And now I find myself in concert with that belief. You know, that's what got me through.
Well, I think that's what speaks to, like, the strength of your character development, because it's easy to just make fun or easy to, like, satirize, but every character, you believe them is real. And there's this idea, I'm wondering if you talk about, you know, this idea of being a teaching artist is something that the character is grappling with, you know, and it's like, we come to understand through Radha that the teaching artist is not just a giver, but then, you know, in the end, she becomes a receiver of confidence, you know, from her students.
Yeah, I was a teaching artist for 20 years. My mom was a teaching artist for 30 years. And I think I did have an evolution, whereas when I first came in, I was very romantic about it. I was like, I'm going to save these children. And I think I got better the more I shut up and let me be of service to the dynamic in the room. I think that the character goes through something similar. And it's funny because my mom shows up in so many ways in the scene. When the water drips on my face in the office and I move, that's my mother. That's my mother's body language. She goes, I was like, that's my mother. And when she talks to Elaine in the end and she says, I see you and I want to invite you back. That's my mother as a teaching artist. I think I got better in seeing and serving the needs of the young people instead of thinking of myself. And so that's what happens with the character. It's like, you know, there's those pans to her where she's like, huh? Okay. So she's not present. She's not aware. And I think when she finally confronts this thing with her mom, all of that baggage that has kind of been blocking her mirror, she can be available to somebody else and go, oh my God, you mean all this time you hated Rosa because you loved her? And, you know, she's got the little cross on there. So that's me saying that the religion has her suppressing herself. But you are in love with this girl. And it was only because this is what the character does. That. And that's what I want the character to do. And that's what I wanted to happen is this whole time she's been focusing on this thing, this level of success. And once she pivots her head, she can say, oh my God, my best friend will go to the ends of the earth to create opportunity for me. My kids will show up no matter what. This young man loves me to pieces, you know, but it's a matter of just shifting the head and looking in a different direction And that is what maybe leads her to go to Brooklyn and say, yeah, I know how tradition has it. I know how gender roles are.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go and confront this young man and just lay it all to bear to say, I'm sorry. And that's the thing. Again, as a filmmaker, I find that I talk less, and I like that I talk less. You know, I don't have to have her say, I'm sorry, I did it. She just shows up, you know?
This is dope. So sadly, we got to wrap up. Like, I feel like another hour, but I mean, maybe if you just want to say quickly, like what you're doing next, and like, and everybody like watching, listening, if you haven't seen this film, it's amazing. You have to see it. 40-year version is fucking dope. She did the thing, and
I appreciate that. And again, like I know we're closing out. I just have to say what it meant to receive that award from you, Dee, because you're someone whose work and choices I've just always admired over the years. From the short version of Pariah to the feature to your latest work, I just feel like you really are harnessing story and, you know, presenting it in ways that are fresh and nuanced. So it means a lot to have this conversation with you. You know, I am still in the process of promoting the film. You know, this is an education for me. I did not know. I thought you make the film, you edit it, you present, you win at Sundance, you're good. Nope. Once you get acquired, it's a whole nother life. So I'm giving myself the rest of the year to do that, and also take a vacation or something. And then I can't talk too much about it, but like I said, I'm going to be mining more of my father's musical legacy for the next story, which will be such a departure, I think, even though it sounds like it's in the same realm. It's not really comedic. It takes place in the past. I tend to love the 90s or what have you. And I'm not in it. And I feel like I can't wait to really step into the role of an auteur and step away from what maybe people are used to, me as a performer or whatever, like to be a real director. Mary Herron.
You're a real director now. You're a real
okay.
Now.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Come on now.
But Mary Herron gave me some good advice about the second film. You know, like that second film is the thing that really establishes, because a lot of people make their first to break into Hollywood, and then they do bigger budgets and more commercial stuff. And I really want to stay on this track and be like you and be like Mary, and, you know, make these choices and stay in the more independent, not necessarily budget, but storytelling. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to see you in the real world. We can drink a beer and party.
I'm gonna get your number. I'm gonna get your number from Rachel or something. We'll hang out.
Okay, absolutely. That would be great. Thank
you
in
for
Harlem,
by the way.
Huh?
I said in Harlem. We'll
yes,
talk.
I would love that. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks
for
having me.
Independent for doing this.